Okay, so the title is Dialectic of Meteors. On the 25th of September 1937, as you can read on the slide, a current of atmospheric disturbances moving from Newfoundland to the Baltic sent masses of warm, moist oceanic air into the corridor of the English Channel. At 5:19 p.m., a gust of wind from the west-southwest uncovered the petticoat of old Henriette Puissou, who was picking up potatoes in her field, slapped the sun blind of the Café des Amis in Plancoët, turned over 8 pages of Aristotle's METEOROLOGICA, which Michel Tournier was reading on the beach at Saint-Jacques, or maybe Saint-Jacques, I have no idea, started the wind pump racing at the Ferme des Mottes, and snatched a handful of gilt leaves off the silver birches in the garden of La Cassine. Published in English as Gemini, Michel Tournier's Les Météores, literally the Meteors, begins with a succession of micro-events assuming a linguistic atmosphere. French expresses with only one word, temps, what English, time and weather, or German, Zeit und Wetter, split in two different terms. In Tournier's novel, disturbances and unpredictability define le temps qu'il fait, weather, while order and regularity are the main features of le temps qui passe, time, supposedly passing with the regularity of a clock. My talk today will show how Tournier imagines the improbable creation of a meteorological body able to overcome the split between time and weather. Enlarged to the dimension of the Earth's atmosphere, the meteorological body is not the mere current of atmospheric disturbances that we hear about in the first sentence of Les Météores, but a new alliance between cosmic time and the terrestrial weather, between chronology and meteorology. To highlight the singularity of the meteorological body, I will compare it with what I will show is the Anthropocene's global body. While the first one leans on a clear rejection of the Galilean physics and dreams of returning to the Aristotelian world in which meteorology was in the same time geological, climatic, and astronomical, the Anthropocene's body results from the Galilean Cartesian physics and its fantasy of a mathematically controlled Gaia 2.0. But paradoxically, Gaia 2.0's fantasy also leads to a kind of return to Aristotle, as if the generalized interconnection of nature with technology, in other words, the disastrous correlation between capitalism and climate, has produced a monstrous epistemological ontological unity mimicking the Aristotelian world. My point in this talk is not to show the technological fantasy underlying what I have called elsewhere the geoconstructivist project at play in the production of an Earth 2.0. Rather, I will explain how the Anthropocene's body repressed the astronomical promises that appeared in the 16th century. The dominant interpretation of the 16th century's astronomical revolution still consists in arguing that heaven crashed onto Earth. To put it succinctly, since Copernicus, nihilism reigns. a good deal of ecological discourse seems designed to heal the narcissistic wound produced by the Copernican revolution. Far from being an unremarkable star having nowhere as its horizon, the Earth would be a living exception in the universe. Yet I will argue today that the astronomical revolution was not a repetition of the Christian narrative, a new kind of fall, but first, to use Blumenberg's expression, the stellarization of the Earth, that is to say, a cultural, scientific, and metaphorical operation by which the Earth was granted a new place in the universe. I will call Dialectic of Meteors an interpretation of the Copernican revolution that would be able to integrate the fall of heaven in the elevation, that is to say, the rising, the movement of rising, and the promotion, the social, symbolic, metaphorical elevation, promotion of the Earth, the rising and the promotion of the Earth. The Dialectic of Meteors sings together the two meanings of the word meteor. On the one hand, the ancient meaning as elevation in the air. On the other hand, the modern meaning according to which, far from rising from the Earth, meteors are passing through the universe and falling from the sky before meeting the Earth's atmosphere. However, let's be dialectical in not forgetting that what falls on the Earth ends up sedimenting, being integrated into biochemical cycles before finally moving back into atmospheric currents. Always thinking together the ascent in the fall and the fall in the ascent, this Dialectic of Meteors aims to show how Tycho Brahe's meteors were anachronically preparing Aristotle's ones, the astronomical reality having from the beginning taken part in the constitution of the meteorological dimension. So instead of simply pitting Aristotle's system against Copernicus' one, let me show how both are at stake in the Anthropocene's Earth, that is both a meteorological sphere a la Aristotle, where the geological and the climatic are intimately intertwined, and also a planet amongst the stars. So in the original French version, Tournier's novel and Aristotle's treatise bear the same title, Les Météores. This repetition and the theme of the double in general being at the core of Tournier's novel. There is temps et temps, time and weather. There is Tournier's Les Météores and Aristotle's. And they are above all the two main characters of the novel, Jean and Paul, almost indistinguishable twins to the point of being called Jean-Paul with an hyphen, symbolizing the umbilicus of their symmetry. That Michel Tournier, the author, splits in Michel Tournier, a novel character reading on a beach Aristotle's METEOROLOGIKA, can be interpreted as an indication related to the cosmological stance of the book. In the novel, Jean, I quote, insists on the necessity for restoring its proper meaning of the word meteor. Its meaning is not, I continue the quotation, as is commonly believed, a stone fallen from the sky, that is called a meteorite, but any atmospheric phenomenon, hail, fog, snow, the aurora borealis, the science of which is meteorology. In his Meteorologika, Aristotle actually understands comets, the Milky Way, hurricanes, and earthquakes as meteors, a list going, as you know, far beyond what is now understood as meteorology. Meteor actually comes from the Greek meteora, nominalized neutral plural of the adjective meteoros, meaning that which is above or which rises in the airs. From meta, that is to say above, behind, and erein, which means to rise. As we know, the Aristotelian world was divided into a sublunary world, sublunary world, Earth as the impermanent domain of becoming, corruption, and death, and the supralunary world, the sphere of fixed stars, where nothing changes. It is in the sublunary world that, according to Aristotle, meteorological phenomena occur. This is why comets are not considered to be celestial bodies, but sublunar bodies situated under the moon and above the highest mountains in the highest region of the atmosphere. However, this meteorology broke up starting in the second part of the 16th century. A paradigm breaker, the Copernican Galilean scientific system refuted Aristotle's division of the cosmos into two worlds, a division that had remained dominant through the Middle Ages. The system is generally presented, I will go quickly because everybody heard about that, from two remarkable traits, two remarkable features, which are two sides of the same coin, the same upheaval. The end of geoanthropocentrism, first, and second feature, the homogenization of the universe. To illustrate this moment, I want to insist today only on one name, that of the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. From November 11, 1572 until the end of March 1574, Tycho Brahe observed SN 572, also called now Tycho's nova, a supernova that was for a time brighter than Venus. During his 18 months of observation, Brahe found that the distance between the new celestial body and the other stars did not vary. This celestial body was therefore a star. Understand the emotion of the astronomer, that a star could appear and disappear, in other words, vary, radically changed the supposed immutability of the supralunar world. Observing later the passage of a great comet of 1577, Brahe showed that the celestial body was too far beyond the moon to be a sublunar phenomenon, leading to the conclusion that comets are extraterrestrial phenomena, having literally nothing to do with what Aristotle called meteorology. What deeply questioned Aristotle's cosmology was thus twofold. On the one hand, there were no longer two worlds, but only one homogeneous world, subject to the same laws, in which the Earth was only a celestial body amongst others. On the other hand, and almost conversely, Aristotle's meteorology was subjected to a sort of epistemological dislocation. It broke down into several sciences, geology, astronomy, climatology, and so on. And it is precisely against this ontological homogeneity and against this epistemological fragmentation that Tournier's Les Météores stands up. Let's take a closer look at this literary reaction to scientific modernity. In Tournier's Les Météores, the twin brothers, Jean and Paul, embody the Aristotelian opposition between the supralunary fixed star and the disturbed Earth lying under the moon. Paul wants, his desire is linked with is linked with that which is fixed, immutable. He would have liked to keep the original twin unit, the absolute out of time of the identical brothers, les frères pareils, brothers without alterity or alteration, who have their own language. But Jean, the other brother, is attracted to the twinless, les sans pareils, that is to say, to those who have no twins, or more precisely, who have killed then devoured their twin brother in their mother's womb. The twinless, Tournier explains, is first and foremost an ogre, a cannibal condemned to loneliness. Attracted to the twinless, Jean goes exploring the world and disappears. Paul tries to find his brother, but his journey turns badly. He suffers a terrible accident and his left lateral limbs are amputated. But his body is subject to a strange transformation. Some members grow back, more than human members, neither those of the twinless nor the ones of the twin brothers. These strange new members considerably develop Paul's sensitivity and knowledge about the earth. From the missing part of Paul appears a new body that Tournier qualifies as déployé, extended to the limits of the sky. Paul's body becomes the living, breathing witness of the meteors. Let's analyze the nature of Paul's meteorological body. The missing part of Paul's body can be superimposed on Jean's disappearance. It is as if Paul was compelled to embody Jean's loss to be able to overcome it. As Tournier writes, the new left part of Paul's body is Jean incorporé, who became a part of Paul. This inclusion gives rise to the creation of a new body that escapes a double dead end, either the closing on itself of the twinless individual condemned to live in the Galilean homogeneous world in which reigns the modern compartmentalization of knowledge, or the closing on itself of twin brothers who withdraw into an imaginary world that temporality, death, and otherness would never touch. Paul's body becomes a kind of meteorological body that extends to the entire atmosphere. The sky, I quote, "The sky has become my brain," Paul says. In Paul's meteorological body, time and weather, it's almost eternity, 5 minutes, are reconciled. Meteorological events are no longer describable in terms of disturbances. Because when I speak English, I'm very slow. I'm sorry about that, but I think it's a necessity. Since there is no longer an overhanging clock that will measure them. In his new meteorological body, Paul can feel and foresee the wind, the rain, and the action of the sun, that is to say, his whole terrestrial body. If I have only 5 minutes, I cannot really explain how, or maybe I can. Let's try. Let's now contrast Paul's new body with the Anthropocene's body, which could be seen as a pure product of the Galilean Revolution, one that follows from a technological mathematical program in which the Earth is mastered and reformed. But let's pay attention to the fact that the destructive reconstruction of terrestrial environments produced a new kind of Aristotelian continuum in which the geological and the atmospheric are made once again. As we know, climate change is a direct effect of human beings' geological force. Geology is nowadays a deterritorialized science that needs to examine what is above the ground, from architecture to the indium tin oxide layer found in touch screens, via the lithium of computer batteries and the platinum of miniaturized electronic circuits. The calcium in our bones has fraternal twins in every machine that geocapitalism produces. The deterritorialization of geology is so extreme that artist Trevor Paglen describes the atmospheric orbits where now useless satellites and technological debris circulate as new geological layers, a soilless sedimentation. Transiting through the Galileo Cartesian machine, the Anthropocene produces a new kind of sublunary world. But from now on, it's no longer the moon that severs the Earth from the rest of the universe. The dividing line between here below and beyond is a geostationary orbit, where technological debris forever fossilize. The moon of the Anthropocene's sublunary is that of artificial satellites. So, I jump to the conclusion. One of the fundamental effects of the astronomical revolution has certainly been to question the geocentric hypothesis. The Earth was dethroned. A narcissistic wound, to use Freud's formula, was inflicted to humankind, immobility, and the centrality assigned to the Earth as decreed by Aristotle were over. However, Earth's centrality did not mean perfection for Aristotle, since the last one was attributed to heaven, to the celestial substance. What the astronomical revolution called into question was rather the uniqueness of the Earth, its privileged position. Aristotle's Earth founded its dignity on being the center of a cosmic submission. The Earth was certainly subject to celestial laws, but it was also warmly surrounded by them. For John Donne, the cosmic wound was the effect of the fall of heaven on earth, the overturning of submission. We make heaven come to us, and henceforth the stars began to obey our pace, he wrote. This fall of the sky caused the loss of the world as we knew it, the correspondences between the earth and heaven having vanished. What Donne failed to see and to glorify is the other side of what he identifies as a unilateral loss. What collapsed was the hierarchy that placed the earth in the empire of death, to borrow from 16th century astronomer Thomas Dix. This hierarchy that depreciated the earth in the name of the incorruptible stars. What took the place of this hierarchy is a celestial democracy in which the earth was admitted as a full member with the sun and the other stars. So, to sum up and conclude my talk today, and it's very strange because it's really a jump now, the exposure of the earth to the astronomical outside reveals that this outside is an integral part of the earth's interiority. It's not just that the earth is among the stars, it is that the stars constitute the earth. The dialectic of meteors consequently describes the multiple operations of ascensions and falls, exposures and inclusions, by which terrestrial singularity is constituted from what is extraterrestrial. No doubt that the Anthropocene's body built itself against the outside, against the universe as a whole, against the elevation of the earth among the stars, because what is the Anthropocene if not the era when human beings, because they strive to put their monogram as their excrements in every corner of the world, tend to meet only themselves. What else is the Anthropocene is not Jean's mechanical nightmare of a world turned in on itself, fascinated by the narcissistic reconstruction of itself, full of acosmic self, without force or ascensions, enjoying flat ontologies and network capitalism. So we need to disrupt this nightmare not only by showing that the earth as an uncontrollable beast will always be at odds with the predictions of the masters and possessors of the blue dot, but by insisting on the earth belonging to the universe, on the elevation of the earth amongst the stars. If the situation of the earth is literally extraterrestrial, then it will perhaps be important to show that the Anthropocene ultimately hides in the end an alienocene, a term bringing to light the precedence of the extraterrestrial on the terrestrial, of the outside on the inside, of the alien on identity. It is this alien component that environmental thought should perhaps consider as such today, not to get rid of the human in the name of the post-human, but to show how the extraterrestrial component of our terrestriality takes us into a dialectic where our attachments to the Earth are turned into stellar detachments. Thank you.